Should you go gray or should you not go gray? That's the question. Today, I want to share with you guys my personal experience in going gray so far, and maybe 5 reasons why you might want to go for it, and a few reasons why you might want to hold off. My name is Laura, and welcome. Now, first, a little disclaimer. If you are coloring your hair and it makes you feel beautiful and happy, then of course, obviously at the end of the day, you do what's best for you. You should keep coloring it then, for sure. But everything, there's positives and negatives. So I thought I would throw it out there to you guys, and maybe that will help somebody make their decision. So first I'll tell you a bit about my story. I'm 58, so I've been coloring my hair for 28 years, going on 30 years already. That's amazing to me. So when I think about, oh my gosh, the amount of money that I've spent over the years and time that I'll never get back coloring my hair, it's incredible. So, but up until about 8 months ago, I was carrying on still coloring my hair like I always have, and I go back and forth. Sometimes I'd bite the bullet and go into the salon and get my hair colored there, but it would be a 4 or 5 hour ordeal and about $200 where I live, and it would last me about 3 weeks, and then I'd have to figure out how am I going to color my roots. And I definitely, probably like most of you that color your hair, we don't go outside the house with our roots showing. So I would buy a spray from the drugstore, almost like spray paint, and you could put it along your roots there, and that would maybe buy me another week, and then I'd have to go back in and get it done again. Now, if you're a hairstylist, I get it. 4 or 5 hours in the salon, the product, the time of the person that's working on your hair, $200 actually doesn't seem like that much when you think of it that way. But for me, I just didn't find the value for me. If it lasted 6 months, that would be a different story. But for me, it was literally once a month. So then I would break down and end up buying hair color at the store, $15 for a box. I'd usually have to do it twice though, so it still ended up being a 5 or 6 hour ordeal, and usually I'd be getting some hair dye all over the bathroom, and anyway, it was just like a dog's breakfast. But I was carrying on doing it because that's what I've always done. So I'm a teacher, and last year I came back to work after spring break, and one of the women that I work with has very dark, almost jet black hair, and her roots were showing. And of course I didn't say anything. I thought, well, maybe she couldn't get into the hairdresser. So carried on, and another week went by, and obviously something else was going on. So finally I worked up the courage to say to her, hey, what's going on with your hair? What are you doing? And she said, well, I've decided to grow out the gray hair. And I was like, really? Wow, how are you doing with it? How are you feeling about it? And she said, you know what, Laura, I feel more confident than I've ever felt. I was shocked. I thought to myself, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. And it was like a watershed moment for me. I went home and I immediately said to my husband, you know what? I think I'm going to grow out my gray hair. And he's always super supportive. He was like, sure, I don't care, go for it. And that was kind of the start for me. Now, I'll throw up a couple pictures here if I can figure out how, to show you what it looked like at the beginning. My hair used to be very dark brown, I guess, and not this color. And at the beginning, no doubt it looked pretty yucky, because when there's only like an inch showing, it just looks like you haven't gone to the hairdresser to get your hair colored. So it didn't look very attractive, that's for sure. But that's the beauty also of being 58 years old. At the end of the day, I don't really care what anybody thought. So I just decided to go for it. I started looking around online, and I didn't realize that there's a whole world out there of ditch the dye people and silver sisters and all this stuff. I had no idea, but of course this isn't a new idea. There's been lots of people growing out their hair for lots of years. So there was a lot of inspiration online and influencers that are talking about it, but they don't really talk about how hard it is to grow out your hair and how long it takes. So there's different ways to do it. People go cold turkey. That's what I'm doing. I guess you'd call it cold turkey. Other people pay $700-800 to get this whole gray blending thing in, which is pretty much like coloring your hair all over again, but it's whatever works for each person and helps them feel their best. So here are some reasons why not coloring my hair anymore has been good for me. Number one, it's the time. Oh my gosh, that's an obvious one, but I don't have to spend months in the hair salon getting my hair done, hours and hours and hours of time of my life that I'll never get back. So it's really refreshing not to have to spend. And you know what, when I think about 28 years of coloring my hair, it probably does translate into months in that chair in the salon. So it's super refreshing not to have to do that anymore. Freeing, in fact. Number two, I feel more confident. My coworker was right. It's so lovely to just be my age and not have to worry about trying to look younger than I actually am. I'm not 30 or 40 anymore. And in fact, it's kind of like a badge of honor to be 58. How lucky am I? And this gray hair reminds me of all the years that I've had, and I'm very lucky to have them. So I do feel more confident. Number three, it's kind of makes you feel more powerful. I don't know why. I've never really cared too much what other people think of me, but I must have cared enough to keep coloring my hair all those years. So there was a time I wouldn't be caught dead going out of the house, never mind, oh my God, making a YouTube video and putting myself out there for all of you to see. No way, not a chance. So it does make me feel powerful to just let it be. The fourth one is an easy one. It's the money. I've spent thousands and thousands over the years, and it's nice not to have to spend that money anymore on my hair. Instead, I can spend a little bit of money on some really nice higher end hair products, shampoo, conditioner that's good for gray hair, and feel good about spending the money. So that's an easy one. And the fifth thing is, I feel like as women, we're very manipulated by the beauty industry. And so I realized, thinking back, once you start having silver hair, I think to myself, well, why is it that we associate this color hair with getting old and wrinkled and washed up? It really is just a color like any other color. And of course, we've been marketed to death over the years so that we associate gray hair with getting old and wrinkled and aging and being washed up. And that's allowed us to feel pressured into buying the hair color and dyeing our hair. So there's a lot of manipulation that goes on there. My girlfriends and I were talking about how back in the 60s, when baby formula first came out, my mom tells me the story about how she felt pressured. The vibe was that if you were modern and you had the means, this was the fashion, was to feed your baby formula instead of breastfeeding. And it was marketed that way. Unless you were a hippie kind of person, you bought formula. And of course, nowadays we know that breastfeeding is the absolute best thing that you could do. And it was just manipulation, right, by these companies to get you to buy their products. So I'm not down for that anymore. I just don't want to do that. So those are some of the reasons why I'm going to keep growing out my gray hair. But there are a lot of reasons why somebody might want to hold off from doing it. The first one that I can think of right off the bat is this process is not for the faint of heart. It takes so long. What you're seeing here is about 8 months of growing out my hair, and I have a long way to go. I'm barely even halfway there. So most people say 2 years, if you have shoulder length hair, is a good benchmark. So that's a long time. It's painfully slow. But I've never considered quitting for 2 reasons. Number one, I would have to do it all over again. So that's the first thing. If I go back to dyeing my hair, then all these 8 months that I've spent growing it is for nothing, and I'd have to start all over again. So that's one reason why. So you really have to be ready and willing to spend the time. And you may not be. Maybe you have some kind of event, a wedding, something coming up where you're not prepared to have your hair look like this in the pictures. So you really have to look and see how much time you're prepared to take. You can do something called toning. So I have been to the hairdresser, and what I did at the beginning was this line was super sharp because my hair was much darker. So I got her to lift as much of this color out as she could. And that softened up this line a little bit. And then I've gone back one time and had the hairdresser put something called toner in my hair, which kind of calmed down this brassy, yellow, orangey stuff at the bottom here. And it worked great, but only for about 2 weeks. And it cost $60. So again, for me, I got to the end of the 2 weeks and I was like, oh my gosh, that really wasn't worth it for me. I'm just gonna leave it and ignore it. So you have to be prepared to take the time. That's the first thing. The second reason is if I quit now, I'll never know how good it might have looked. The second thing, if it's affecting you emotionally and making you feel really down on yourself, then in my opinion, you're not ready to grow out the gray. And I wouldn't put yourself through that if that's the way that it's making you feel. Then I'd hold off. Number three, if you work in some kind of industry where the youth thing is a factor or you're expected to look a certain way, then I'd take a close look to how you go about growing out your gray and how it will impact you. There's a lot of negativity out there, and it depends on the job and the career that you have. The men, they look distinguished, charming, all this kind of stuff, authoritative. Us women, the vibe is, oh, you're getting old, you're aging and wrinkled and washed up. Those societal norms are so crazy when you think about it. At least we still have our hair. That was just a joke, I promise. But in Canada, we have one story that I can think of to bring home this point is we have a national news channel that goes across the country, and the news anchor on there, she was there for 35 years. Really well known in Canada, incredible reporter, and she was the news anchor. And a couple of years ago, all of a sudden, the minute she turned her hair gray, they didn't renew her contract. And all of a sudden she was off the air. Now, the company put out a lot of reasons why they were going in another direction and all this kind of stuff, and that it was just a coincidence. But she put out there on social media that she was blindsided, and it came out that a staffer had heard one of the higher ups saying who told her she could grow out her gray hair, and they weren't happy with the lighting in the studio, how it reflected off her silver hair. So it created such a stir in Canada that two big companies, Dove Soap and Wendy's, which is, I think, North American, like American and Canadian. It's like McDonald's kind of idea, but their logo is a little girl with red hair and braids, and they turned it to gray for a while, and Dove Soap did a big gray hair campaign right after that happened. So it created quite a stir here. So if you work in an industry where you face that kind of pressure to keep looking young all the time, I feel for you, but you'll really want to check out whether or not it's the right time to go gray. The last reason that I can think of which would make me hold off from going gray is if you're going through a lot of changes in your life. How we say, well, if you're going through a lot of life changes, now's not the time to get your hair cut, that kind of thing. It wouldn't be the time to go gray either. You might find yourself starting and quitting and coloring and starting and getting down on yourself for not being able to hang in there. So if it was me and I was going through lots of changes, personal changes in my life, I might hold off on the gray until things steady out. So those are my thoughts on the whole growing out the gray thing. I hope that there's something in there that might be useful to you in making your decision whether or not you go gray. But either way, you're beautiful. Thanks for showing up. And if you like what you see, if you could hit subscribe, and that would help me out in this new channel, this new adventure that I'm on. I have to say, in my last video, somebody that I didn't know actually commented on my video. I was so excited that somebody outside my friends and family actually saw the video and made a comment. It really lifted me up. So to that person, thank you so much. Guys, we'll see you later. Bye.